districts across America who are facing the redistricting issue do not have. All of our schools are excellent. There are no exceptions to that rule. Congratulations, HSE, for earning that for all of our schools. I'd ask you to please consider these points. Use the process tonight that the young Richter has designed for us. It's a good one that listens to the voice of the people. Share your thoughts. This is the time to do so. And I promise you, we will consider, as we make a recommendation to the school board, your thoughts will be considered in that process. I want you to recognize, too, that realignment of boundaries for the elementary, intermediate, and junior high schools will provide information that may lead to a 100% feeder pattern discussion that from kindergarten all the way to the 12th grade in the future. I do want to ask you to make sure that the board's goals for the boundary process are met. Tracy will review that with you as the meeting starts. I know that the high schools will be a part of your table discussion, but as best as you're able to do not let it dominate your conversation. Remember to keep your focus on what the board asked us to do. Your job tonight is to take the plans that are before you that have gone through several steps, which Tracy will reiterate, and to make those plans better plans. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that you will do that and that you'll do that well. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the President and CEO of the Young Richter. This is Tracy Richter. Tracy?
I'm not big for standing behind lecterns. I want to make sure throughout the entire meeting that everybody in the room can hear me. So those in the back, I see you way back there. If I ever start to kind of do this, just raise your hand and say, get that microphone back up, please. I just want everybody to hear the whole presentation. First of all, welcome. Take a deep breath, because I have to. I'm in front of a lot of people I don't know. My name is Tracy Richter. I'm the president and CEO of a firm out of Columbus, Ohio, that does K-12 educational facility planning across the country. Part of a scope of service that we do all over the country is we do redistricting processes. My background is I'm actually an Indiana boy. I grew up in Camden, little dot on the map, over in Carroll County, Indiana. But I haven't been in Indiana in about almost 20 years now. I've been doing this for 15 years. Before that, I taught middle grades education. And now I'm able to travel the country and work with communities just like yours. To go through process is sometimes difficult, much like this one. I'll tell you that redistricting and consolidation are meetings that keep me up at night. I do this and I'm not really, I speak in front of big crowds all the time. But at 3 o'clock this morning, I'm up. And I'm thinking about you, I'm thinking about your communities, I'm thinking about the families here, because in a redistricting process, unfortunately, people get moved. And we know that. And it's not an easy conversation to have. And I know that too. And so we don't take it lightly. When we start to move boundaries, it then tells a child that, you know, as a second grader, next year you're going to be in another elementary school. But hopefully what we're going to show you tonight is a process that allows full groups of children to move together. Keep subdivisions together as much as we can. And we do it almost all the way through this process. I'm going to keep reiterating that. With the exception of 2 subdivisions, Deer Path and Avalon South, those are pretty much, and Deer Path is already kind of separated anyway in its boundaries, but we've kept subdivisions together as best we could. Now, what we've also tried to do is we've also tried to maintain a K-8 feeder. Dr. Carnes talked about the high school, and I know that's a pressing issue out there. And again, we don't take that lightly. Our redistricting committee talked about it at length. Our cluster committees, and I'll explain those, talked about those at length. But understand that this process is about trying to set it up for the future to make sure that there is data provided, that if that's the direction someday you go to, that you can have that discussion and have a discussion with data that validates that decision. And so that is part of this process of trying to build steps forward in that. And so the redistricting, the scope of this, and the charge that we've been given is that the redistricting process will reach target building capacities, trying to, for all schools, to allow space for all schools in areas of growth. Now, the Board of School Trustees has set priorities in no particular order, but set priorities in this plan to do three things. The first thing is, to the greatest extent possible, is to assign students that are closest to their schools. Now, that's not always possible when you're trying to push as far as we're trying to push also. But when cluster committees and redistricting committees looked at this, they were looking at major thoroughfares that we could get kids in short pathways to schools when the boundary had to move farther away. The next one is to design a feeder system, is to make sure that when a student enters into that elementary grade level, is that they know what intermediate and then what junior high they're going to, and they stay together. Now, again, I'm going to show to you that there's a couple examples we didn't quite do that, but it's only two or three small neighborhoods that, to get your input on, maybe we can solve that. The third one is to maintain neighborhoods and subdivisions. You're going to hear a term called catchment areas tonight, if you haven't heard that term already, through the grapevine, through emails, through the telephone, through every text that you've ever gotten in the last 4 days. But a catchment area is basically, it's not derived by anything you've ever seen other than keeping subdivisions together. So when you hear the term catchment, you see that tonight, basically every catchment that we built was built around the idea of subdivisions and neighborhoods. But again, in the effort to go here. Now, the redistricting committee, which is a group of about 35 people that have sat with us a few nights and talked about how to do this and do this better, has reviewed data for us, has helped shape this, is, to the greatest extent possible, they added this also, is to try to balance socioeconomic status across the district. Try not to create pockets of high free and reduced lunch populations, and trying to balance that and spread that throughout schools. That way schools have some equal opportunity and access and all the resources that are needed, instead of putting all those resources and all that pressure on one school to perform like that. And so one of the efforts, again, that we tried to meet after doing all this is then trying to look at socioeconomic status. Now, the only way that we can do socioeconomic status in today's school world is to measure free and reduced lunch counts. Overall, the district's about 14%. And so trying to keep that number in your head, about 14% is your average, you're going to see some schools that have been at 22, 23%. And you're going to see some schools that are 4 and 5%, 2 and 3%. Sometimes it's driven about where the schools are, where the neighborhoods are. And sometimes schools can't control that, and most times schools can't not control that. But we try to find ways then to balance enrollment as best we can. So the process, and again, a little hard to read, but the process is a process intended to build one upon each other. Is to start with the baseline data of enrollment capacity, look at projected enrollment, look at programs and buildings, trying to get all that together to then lead up to what we call scenarios and options development. So we went out, we met with, in 3 areas, we got about 30 or 35 people in 3 areas, we met at the 3 intermediate schools, I think the 1 junior high, and we started to build this district again. We tore it all the way down and started to rebuild it in order to come here tonight. We have a redistricting committee that, once again, is charged with helping us kind of steer this process, to watch data, to kind of vet the options through, eventually to take back to them to kind of vet one more time after this community meeting where we're going to go with final recommendations. Now, none of these committees, and let me make this clear, none of these committees have the responsibility of making the final decision. And so it's not on one person, it's not on one person on that committee, it's not directing that at one person. The ultimate decision of redistricting this district is on the board. So this process is intended to build to a recommendation of a best possible option for redistricting. Take that recommendation to the superintendent, who then presents it to the board for a decision. We need to do all that by December 15th. And so we're on kind of a tight schedule with this, we know that. But with that, we're going to be able to tell students early after Christmas, after the holiday break, about the redistricting plan. so parents, families, students can be prepared sooner. Now, on your tables, you have a couple of copies of what's the background report. And I'm going to borrow yours just for a second, that's okay. It just looks like that. There's just a couple of copies, and this is online so you can look at it, but we didn't, there's a lot of print on your table already. But what we have in here is just some background information. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of that data tonight, just to kind of show you some information that we've worked on. And when it's in the background report, you'll note that on the top corner, I've noted what page it's on. And so if you go on, even though there's only a couple copies, you can go online, you can look at this information too. But this is your historical enrollment. No surprise, you guys have grown. You guys have experienced this overwhelming growth in the last 10 years, nearly 6,000 students. Folks, that's impressive. Of anywhere in the country, that's impressive. Now, with that, though, comes growing pains. As we know, it causes shifts, it causes building, construction, tax dollars, and it causes redistricting. But what's interesting about it, as you start to look at the enrollment, we color code this because the numbers sometimes are what they are, but we color code it so you can see that the darker colors there indicate trends. So those reds in there show you where bubbles of enrollment are. Right now, you have a big bubble in that 4th, 5th grade area. That's going to push through your school district. Intermediates and junior highs are going to feel it in the next 4 years. That's why you've got another intermediate junior high coming online. Then the high schools are going to feel it. So you've got additions to your high schools that are going to be able to handle the capacity in there. But then what happens is that kindergarten, 1st grade enrollment start to drop again. And eventually, now in your report too, and again, I'm just going to, because you can't, and this is intentional, but I just want to let you know they're in the report, is that you have about 3 sheets here of school-by-school historical enrollment for the last 5 years. So at your table, you have information to show you by school if that enrollment has declined or increased over the last 5 years. Now, why that's important is because as we developed new boundary scenarios, we emptied buildings below their capacity on the east side of this district, and as we pushed west, we started to put buildings at or just above their capacities. And the reason we did that was because of decline in enrollment as you get a little further west in the district. And then that growth on the east side, so we can grow into the buildings once again. And so you're going to see that occur as you see some of these options that go out there. But ultimately, in the projected enrollment, you can see that at the K-4 grade level, there's an anticipated decline of enrollment in the next 10 years of about 500 students. Now, that will change because subdivisions will sprout up once again after the kind of that 07, 08, 09 kind of slowdown, which is kind of transgressed into right now in this current decade, but we're starting to pick up again. But the current projection shows that we're going to decline at the elementary grade level. So what we have done is that we have planned this district at the K-4 level at today's enrollment to make sure that we do have enough seats going into that projection. So we're planning for that big 7970 number with the idea that we're going to have some seats in the next 4 or 5 years because of declining enrollment, because of that smaller kindergarten and 1st grade classes that are in there. And so as you try to think about how you try to plan capacity of buildings to their enrollment, this comes into play. And how we can balance this better in order to avoid coming back to this very same conversation year 2 or 3. What we're trying to do is we're trying to push it as far west as we can to get to at least this one cohort, this 5-year cohort of K through 4, and beyond that. With even the hope that in time, as that west grows, maybe the west is the only part of the district that may need some adjustments in time with the rapid growth that may occur. And so, again, keep that in mind as we're trying to, as you look at this enrollment going forward. Now, catchments. This is a catchment map. You don't have it at your table because it would only confuse matters at this point. But what we did on this map is all those little boxes have numbers in them, and they correspond to most likely a subdivision. Now, in this, we attach, and these are what the groups were able to work with, is that we took a catchment map and I think there was 120 some odd catchments in the district. And every catchment had a description with it that explained K4 enrollment, 5-8 enrollment, and then the K8, the K4 and then the 5-8 socioeconomic. And then it listed the subdivision. Now, what the cluster groups were tasked to do is to take those catchment areas and break them down and look at none of the existing boundaries as they are today. And then to align the K4 enrollment in elementary schools in the schools with their enrollment. And so once again, you see a Thorpe Creek, you see a Geist, you even see a Durbin that are way overutilized today. And the task is to take those catchment areas and push them west into those next area of schools. So the Fall Creek, the Brook School, the Hoosier Road, then keep going, Cumberland, then Harrison Parkway, Lantern, trying to push as far as you could go that way. Catchment by catchment. Now some of the catchment would have 12 kids in it because the neighborhood wasn't that big. Some of the catchments had 100, 120 in it because we didn't want to break up those neighborhoods. And so you can imagine trying to put a puzzle together of a district like this and trying to balance enrollment of schools of growth so you get it below the capacity of their building, and then pushing it far enough so by the time you got to Fishers, hopefully you put Fishers at about 105 or 110 capacity because you know in 2 or 3 years it's going to be back to its regular 100% utilization. And so as that catchment system worked, you saw the groups working together they get one pass, and most groups basically kind of started from that Geist, Thorpe Creek, Durbin, and tried to push going kind of that western push. Because those were the schools most pressed for their capacity right now. And so, as they did that, again, they had to stick with the criteria. Trying to assign students to their closest schools, trying to make sure they maintained a feeder pattern if they could, and then maintaining neighborhoods and subdivisions, which they did. And so as you can see then, you start to get into, well, another tool that they had here though, was that we used geographic information systems, which is a mapping tool of data. And so we were able to pull up where students live, we were able to count students, what grade they were in. We could see about every piece of data you wanted to see. We could see that if you split a catchment in half, how many kids could go to a school versus the other school. But the GIS also provided a 5-year projection of school-age population. Once again, not so concerned about the numbers, but the trends. Provided by what's ESRI, which is kind of the data master of GIS. It's like the Microsoft of Geographic Information Systems. They do yearly 5-year projections based on all kinds of data. These are the things like CVS uses to place their stores. And so they use this very same data to project population, housing, economic growth. We do it to project school-age children. The dark red means significant growth. As it gets blue, we see decline in school-age population. So once again, those catchment cluster groups, what they were doing was looking at this to say, hey, I've got about a 20% growth of school-age population. How does that relate to how many students I need to put in that building? So once again, you may see a school like a Fishers, like a Cumberland, like a Lantern, that is designed to go over capacity in the first year, which may mean 1 or 2 extra students in a classroom or may mean a portable or 2 on the site. But nothing too demanding on the school where it just completely kind of seizes it. And so when you get into there, so they're looking at this kind of growth projection saying, okay, how does that relate now? And how do I tie that in too? Now, that's when you develop options. Now on your table, and once again, I'm just going to steal one from you if that's okay, thank you. You have option maps. Now with that option map, I'm going to ask you to pick up 2 things, if you would. The first thing you're going to pick up is about a 6-page document that lists all the subdivisions in the district. And then one more thing I'm going to have you pick up with it. It's a 2-page document that says options comparison, live-in enrollment utilization. While you do that, I'm going to get a drink if that's okay. Okay, so because we know that sometimes maps with too much detail become way too cumbersome, but without enough detail become ambiguous. And so you try to find the middle ground. So what we've tried to do here is in the subdivision page, that paper that you have, those 6 pages, is that we've tried to list for every school what subdivisions are in those boundaries. Give you an idea because you know your subdivisions in those areas. The other thing that we've done is we've taken the current status of schools, so the 2015-16 capacity of buildings. That's next year's capacity. So we're building towards next year's capacity. And then you got the current live-in enrollment. Now, this is a key piece of information. The live-in enrollment does not equal the current enrollment of the building. It indicates how many kids, K4, live in that boundary currently. Now, the only way we can plan forward is the exact same way. Now, we know that kids transfer across boundaries occasionally. That happens. You get some school choice, you get some kids following their parents, you do all that. But at your elementary grade levels, your percentage is probably 1 to 4% of kids kind of transfer across boundaries. And in most cases, it's a wash. And so you get, 20 kids that leave, you get 19 kids come in a lot of cases. So the live-in is an important number because as we build the options, we are planning for the live-in enrollment at its peak, and that's today. So what that sheet does then is says in option 1 for, let's say, Brooks School, we have, it goes from 785 to 710, and the utilization is at 100%. And it compares each option, so you can go across and evaluate each option against its current school pretty quickly. And so on the next page then, what we've done is we've done that very same thing for socioeconomic tests, that frame reduced lunch percentage. And so you can see the current versus what the proposed in each option is. Once again, weighing according to what's important to you. If that option, first of all, meets the district priorities, and second of all, meets your goals as a family, because we need to know both. Now, here's something else I'm gonna say about these options. Is there are going to be options on here that there are people in this room that you're not going to agree with any of the options. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay not to agree with any of the options. We just need to know that you don't agree with those options. My guess is what's going to happen, because I've done this enough to know, is that at the end, it's going to look like all 3 of these kind of mixed together, kind of formed together, based on all the input that we get from community members. That's because they do that. We see that people say, look, you can't do this here, but can you shape it like this? And they start to meld together. And so as we come back out of the community meetings, it's important to us to know that there are options out there that nobody agrees with. And so that's important. Now, on the options also, they're going to take you through the elementaries and the intermediate junior highs. We do show some data, and I'm going to explain the data about kind of that whole how many students in essence kind of flip back in the current, kind of that situation we're in today. But we want to show you those numbers because we want to show you how important that is to, if we have further discussion, why those numbers will be important. So on the first option, you can see in front of you, what we do is we put it out there with the current and then the projected out there for balancing. And that's that first number out there, and we give you the percentage of utilization right by the building. And then we tell you what the proposed socioeconomic balance can be. Now, the other thing about socioeconomics, I'm going to tell you, those socioeconomic numbers will change. For instance, There is a lot of development going to happen north of Thorpe Creek, south of Durban, in that area. Some of those houses are going to be, they're not going to produce any free and reduced lunch kids. And that's going to decrease that number. Some are going to produce free and reduced lunch kids. We know that. But we anticipate that some of those numbers will drop with development that will happen in that area. So at a Durban, you might see that that percentage might be a little high, but understanding that development may bring that down. Now, the other thing is we're trying to meet the goals of balancing this utilization. You're going to see there's a few schools that don't meet that goal here. If you have some suggestions as to how that might improve, we can do that. But here's what happens, folks, and I'm going to tell you exactly where the crux of the issues are, is that you have an area that's right on this corner, right here, that is pretty far away from every building you could possibly imagine. And so, and trying to bring that in, there happens to be, in that particular area, a little higher concentration of free and reduced lunch. It just is what it is. No value judgment on that, it just is what it is. It is an opportunity to balance, but without the idea of taking them out of their neighborhoods to get them to a faraway school just for the sake of balancing. So you have to take that in consideration. The last thing we want to do is take a kid way across the district just to try to meet a number. That is not our goal. And so we're trying to get these students, in particular in this area, either into this Thorpe, into Durban, even over to Harrison Parkway, to try to balance some of that. Even pushing down in one case into Brooks School, not in this case. So you can see that. Now, at the intermediate junior high, let me explain 3 numbers on here. That's the next page on the options. First things first, so on Riverside, that 34% that you see that are Hamilton Southeastern, that 34% represents Lantern Road Elementary. And so, and you guys probably understand this better than I do, because you live it. But basically what it does is it says 100% of Lantern Road goes to Riverside, and 100% of those kids, not in the rebalancing process, but 100% of those kids then go to Hamilton Southeastern. That represents that 34% of kids that split back. The same thing occurs at the Fisher Sand Creek, where that 43% is the Hoosier Road. So 100% of the elementary schools. So our goal was at least keep the 100% of elementary schools together. That way we have that feeder working for us. And again, you can further discussion later on about that. Now, this little 3%er right here, guess what? It's this little corner right here. You see that pink right there? In that corner? That little pink area. That's the 3%. What this option tried to do was to try to balance some utilization and some socioeconomic balance, but in that case caused a 3% split there. Again, you don't have to agree with that part of the option, but if it meets those other goals, this may be an option that you like. Now, option 2. Now, option 2, and again, you can see how the new boundaries are configured also, as you can look on the maps and see, because you're going to see that it pushes and pushes and pushes as far west as we can go. Now, in this, we do a really good job of balancing some of that utilization out there. So you see a lot of those red marks are gone. We've grown it in the areas that we need to, but we still have a little bit of issue at Durban there. Okay, a little overutilized. Again, doesn't quite meet what we're trying to get after, but is there a way to continue to fix that? Redistricting committee and clustering committees, this is where we're a little different than when we left you, because we had to push a little bit north of the Thorpe boundary that didn't impact the socioeconomic status, but refilled a little bit of Thorpe in order to relieve Durban. And so we had to shift a little bit to make sure we got that a little better balance in order to meet our goals. Now, on the intermediates and the junior highs, Same thing happens with Lantern Road and Hoosier Road here. But I got a 6.2%er again. A little higher, but again, you see these two areas right here? In that corner, once again, those are those two areas that cause that 6%. So you see how close we are. We're very close to making this almost exactly 100% with those two elementaries that are 100% feeders back to their high schools. But they're doing that whole K-8 and then switch back to 9-12, as you're all aware. So again, looking at that 6.2, make a little modification. We're about there with this option too. And you can see that, especially as I look at that intermediate socioeconomic status, I've got almost direct balance in the intermediate junior highs in free and reduced lunch counts. That's a great balance for us. Okay? So, in the third option, now the third option on the balancing actually does a really good job of balancing emptying schools that to refill, but then filling those western schools. So it pushes pretty hard. Now, again, part of the complication of this is the number of students you impact. And so if I were to look at like a Thorpe Creek that currently has a little over 900 kids in the building, and I take that to 600 immediately, understand that that's a big move. Nobody's questioning that. That is a big move. Now, how you implement and how you, whether it's that the rising last grade of schools, as you've done it in the past, or what it is, how it's implemented is not part of our task in this. Ours is just to make sure we get the boundaries so they can set that implementation for you. And so again, with an effort to minimize the impact on kids, trying to see how many kids do we keep that first year of implementation. Now, at the intermediate junior highs, two areas in this scenario, two small areas that take you away from only one school doing that jump back and forth on that. And that's, if you look closely, it's, once again, it's this kind of area just north of that kind of Fall Creek, Brook School area right in there. And then it's this small area just south of 69, just almost south of here, right in this area right here, that goes up into Hoosier Road. So there's two really kind of, again, we're about 4 or 5 catchment areas away to making an even closer move towards 100% feeder at the intermediate junior high. So again, it has a benefit to it also, and challenges to it. And I think that's what you're going to see with all of them. All of them come with benefits to them. It balances the enrollment we want. It helps balance that socioeconomic status. It keeps kids in their subdivisions together. It keeps at least kids from K through 8 together as best they can. And all of them do. So they all have benefits. The challenges are those small areas that we're going to have to make some decisions on, and really that's up to you on how you value that, the utilization of buildings, socioeconomic, the feeder, and kind of putting that in priority as a community. And that's up to you. That can't be up to me. I don't live here. I got my own priorities in my own school district that I want to live by. So, those are your 3 options out there. Those are just these sheets that you have in front of you. I don't even have to cover these because you have them in front of you that we just went through. And you can see that as they compare against each other. Now, our process is a little different than most. Our role as a consultant here is to collect data from you. And we do that through written format. So what you see at your tables are several things to help us get through that. The first thing is you have all the options in front of you. You have the data. You have the background reports in front of you. There's a lot of data there. The next thing that you have at your table is a registration form. Okay? If you want to fill that out, fine. Name and email is fine. If you don't have an email address, fine. If you don't want to fill it out, don't. I'm good with that. But what we're trying to do is to communicate, make sure who we're communicating with in the district and trying to reach out to more people. The second thing you have is an individual questionnaire. The questionnaire is actually pretty simple. Now, first things first. If you do not want to fill this out tonight and turn it in, because there is a lot of data in front of you, and you want to take a few minutes to absorb it, you want to get to your band boosters, I think there's a swim meet tonight. This is going to go online tomorrow evening, at the beginning or the end of tomorrow night's meeting. Okay, we're going to dub over tomorrow this presentation so people can listen to the presentation, and they can watch it, and they can watch the PowerPoint, and then they can answer the survey online. You can do the same thing, because the last thing we're here to do is pressure you into making a decision tonight. That is not our goal. If you want to take some time to do that, great. So you take that individual questionnaire, and it's real simple. The first question is required. And the reason, and it just asks you what school or schools you're affiliated with. And the reason we want to do that is we want to see that we're getting representation across the district. And we want to be able to kind of sort data. We want to say, okay, well, now Fishers Elementary had 500 to 600 participants. If we take them out, does it skew the data for us? And so we want to be able to look at data a lot of different ways to make sure that we're making good decisions and balanced decisions. Now, so it's the only one required. If you don't fill that one out and it goes through our scanner, it won't get recorded. Just fair notice on that. The rest are optional. If you want to answer them. If you don't, you don't. But it's pretty simple as it goes, is that the first three questions, or the first couple of questions, ask you to look at each option on its own merit. On its own merit. Separate it from the rest, and according to your judgment, does it meet the criteria that the board has put forth in this process? You may think it does, you may think it doesn't, but we want you to rate that. The next set of questions then ask you to rank the questions against each other. So it ranks them in order of your preference on there. Now, you might not have a preference at all, don't answer it if you don't like any of it. And you can say that in those first questions. The last question on there, question 5, is a simple comparison against each other. If you have the choice between 1 and 2, which would you choose? If you have the choice between 1 and 3, which would you choose? If you have the choice between 2 and 3, which would you choose? And the last page, right away. This is for you to write comments. All comments will be typed and sorted by like comment. And so what we see in this is that if there's a lot of people that talk about the same thing, it rises to the top and fills the book for the board to read. And so, again, an opportunity online is that you can go and type this online if you want, or you can just bullet point it, and that's fine. We'll scan it, and we'll type it. So we have 2 written records of it. Now, you can't, I'm going to tell you, you can't go online and fill out like 5 in a row. We can catch that. You can hop around town if you wanted to, but you've got to really be ambitious to do that. But what we want is we want good quality feedback from every citizen out here. And the way to do that is not to put a microphone out and let 75 people talk tonight, because we'll be here until the redistricting process is done. You've got more board meetings, you can go talk if you need to. Our goal is to collect this data tonight in written format. You have until next Monday night, I'm going to say Tuesday morning, 6:30 a.m. The online survey will be till 6:30 a.m. next Tuesday. Then we've got to cut it off. I've got to start getting this analyzed. I've got a deadline to meet. I'm going to guarantee you somebody's going to call on Thursday and say, why isn't that survey up? But we're going to make it very clear that it's going to be that morning at 6:30 a.m. So please, if you don't answer it tonight, please go online and do that. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, go on, fill it out. Because we want that input. After you're done with your individual questionnaire, what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to work as a group in this group questionnaire, and it's the exact same questionnaire. And we're going to see that if your table can reach consensus on each of the questions. That's a big task. Two people can sit across from the table and never reach consensus. I've been married. So, but we know that, and we know that's hard to reach consensus sometimes. If you can't reach consensus at your table, there's a spot on there to mark no consensus. And once again, marking no consensus is as important as marking an answer. So we know where they fall short. So after that, when you're done with that, we're going to post on, Matt, are you going to get those hung up there, do you think? Probably. All right. On that back wall is going to be the questions. So that if there's one person at the table, if there's not somebody with a circle, one person take control of that blue sheet. You won't get in trouble. We're not going to record. We're not fingerprinting them. Just take control of that. There's instructions for facilitating the table. After the group person is done, come to the back of the room, and those questions are going to be on the wall, and we're going to mark the answers of the group. Just so you can get a general idea of what people were thinking tonight. Nothing scientific about it, folks. I'm going to tell you, there's nothing scientific about it other than trying to get a little bit of closure as you walk out tonight. When you're done with that, last instruction. Please put registration form, individual questionnaire, and the group questionnaires back in that envelope. And take the materials you want, leave the rest of the materials, don't clean up, we'll do that for you. If you have to go to another meeting, now's a great time to do that, or a meeting, now's a great time to do that, but with that, I'm going to let you get started. If you have questions, raise your hand. I've got district personnel willing to help. I've got Matt. Matt, raise your hand. Way in the back corner. He's a data guy, he knows a lot of data. We're going to come and answer your questions. Thank you very much for your time. After your group is done, feel free to go. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your participation in this. Have a great evening.